Hello and welcome to Overtime Hockey Talk. My name is Mark Paul, Justin Baker, my co-host, as always. Joining me in studio, well, not always joining me in studio, but joining me in spirit. But here for real, no spirits yet. That's like 70 years down the line. Jeez. You're going to live till you're 134.
No, probably not.
100 years down the line.
Yeah, right. Kirsten and I have already decided that I'm going to be the first one to go out of the two of us.
Well, that's what happens when you date a high schooler. Just kidding, Kirsten.
She's only 6 years younger than me.
I know.
Not too bad.
I know. She's actually the same age as my wife.
That's true.
My wife. Yeah.
It's wife
that's
now,
weird to say. I mean, I'm just a year younger. Am I a year younger than you?
Yeah.
A whole year younger?
Just a whole year.
Did you graduate in 03?
02.
Oh, you graduated 2 years before me.
Yeah.
I'm 04. Did you go to school a little bit early? Like, were you the youngest
I'm an August baby,
usually?
but yeah, usually I'm...
So you're an August baby, but you started like that... You started that same year, probably that year.
Yeah,
you were like
4
starting kindergarten or something like that.
Something like that.
They never do that anymore. Like you would have started a year later for sure.
Oh yeah.
But that's all right. You get through life faster.
Thank you.
You were indoctrinated more quickly than most. Okay. On the show today, we're going to talk autopsies of the Carolina Hurricanes and the San Jose Sharks. Both teams eliminated from the Stanley Cup playoffs, and we have our Stanley Cup Final matchup. The St. Louis Blues for the first time since the early 70s, and the Boston Bruins make it to the finals for the first time since 2011.
Yes.
I was trying to think if they had, for some reason in my brain I knew that, but I was like, wait, have they been to the finals and lost? But no, they did. They weren't one of the casualties of the Blackhawks or the Kings.
Nope, just since Vancouver.
Yeah. So, and they should have lost to Vancouver. If it weren't for, who was it? The guy who there was that terrible hit.
Tim Thomas?
No, there was a terrible hit in like game 6. And the Bruins basically got pissed. They won that game, and then they won in Game 7, and that was that. And I can't remember what it was. You can remind us on Twitter, @OT Hockey Talk. We always love to hear from you. But we'll do our autopsies. We'll talk Stanley Cup Finals. But before we do that, we're going to just talk a couple little news things going on in the league. First one, the top of our list, Phil Kessel has been officially, it's out there. He is rumored to be involved in a deal with the Minnesota Wild. I think... maybe for Jason Zucker, that's my guess. Any other thoughts or possibilities?
Yeah, I also heard Jack Johnson and Victor Rask going back the other way with Kessel for Zucker. And it's
Victor
weird.
Rask?
Yeah, Victor
Isn't he
Rask.
already on the Minnesota Wild?
Yeah, he plays. I'm sorry. No, he plays for... maybe it's going back the other, like being swapped.
Victor Rask is on the
You're right,
Minnesota
because he
Wild.
got traded for Niederreiter.
You're saying that they would trade Zucker and Rask for Jack Johnson and Phil Kessel.
Yeah.
Wow, that would mean that Minnesota has a lot of weird contracts. Why would you trade for Jack Johnson's contract?
I
because
don't know.
They're willing to take Victor Rask's. Victor Rask isn't being paid an absorbent amount.
Well, maybe they're gonna, keep some of Kessel's money. I don't know. It's, it's weird to me because you think, right, you're bringing a new GM in Minnesota, right?
He's making $4 million.
$4 million. Okay, yeah. So that could be why Jack Johnson's going back the other way too to help alleviate some of that cap situation. But it would be. I'm sure there's draft picks in there too. But it's interesting to me from a Minnesota standpoint, right? Like, don't get me wrong, Phil Kessel, great scorer. He's a point per game player last couple seasons.
32 years old.
Yeah, for the next couple years, he's still going to be productive. He's still got a hell of a shot. I'm not really too worried about it. I think he's actually 31, which is even better. But regardless, I think when you bring in a new GM, right, you're almost saying at this point, hey, we have to retool, we have to, either reload or revamp this team, right, because the current situation's not working. And bringing in Phil Kessel clearly says, hey, we expect to make the playoffs next year. We're not, doing this rebuild thing.
Not trying to do a rebuild,
right.
For sure.
Especially a guy at his age. When you're definitely in your low 30s or even high 20s. At that point, you're saying, we're not doing a rebuild. So, interesting to me. I've also heard, too, that Phil Kessel does not want to go to Minnesota, that he's unwilling to waive his no-trade clause. Now,
really?
Yeah. Now, whether that changes here in the next month, before July 1st, when, you can actually start trading guys, is a whole other story. But, yeah.
Well, you can trade guys once the finals are over, right?
Yeah. I think so. Yeah. Something like that. But.
Yeah, it would be fascinating Eric Stahl, is obviously a free agent at the end of this year. So he has one more year left on his deal. Maybe he's included in a deal, or is there a chance that, hey, Carolina looking like a lot different of a team, and boy, would Eric Stahl look nice coming in on your third line, maybe.
Well,
coming back and rejuvenated and
get the Stahl brothers back together again.
When Eric Stahl was in Carolina, that team was they were inept in every way. They had the whole worst goaltending. They couldn't get a save. They had no depth up the middle other than him. And then there was Jordan
talking the
Stahl.
last couple of years.
Yeah, and Jordan Stahl was really, for lack of a better word, stalling out. And you didn't really have much winger depth. Well, now you look at this team, and obviously they're a fortunate far cry from where they were 2 or 3 years ago when they traded Stahl to the Rangers at the deadline. That worked out well. And Eric Stahl's kind of reinvented his game, and is there a chance that Eric Stahl gets maybe dealt back there or somewhere else? Or is he just here? Is this just, I mean, I guess if you're trading for Kessel, you're thinking he's here?
Yeah, I think so, especially like what I said, you're thinking playoffs are bust at this point for Minnesota. And, Minnesota's a team, I think they finished 27th in goals for last year, and so definitely adding a guy like Phil Kessel would definitely help in that situation. Yeah, but I think if I don't like the trade from a Minnesota standpoint, because I think if you're ready to move a guy like Jason Zucker and basically go after some young scoring, I mean, personally, I think I would just say let's just start tanking and rebuilding and stuff. But that's just me. But I mean, don't get me wrong. I think Matt Dumba is a great young player.
Well, and the fact that he played 32 games last year. That your number one defenseman. I'll say Dumba is, at this point, maybe more effective than Ryan Suter, despite the fact that Ryan Suter has an oxygen tank, like an extra lung built in his body somewhere. I mean, Matt Dumba is certainly the most valuable defenseman that they have. And so I think that you get him back healthy, you swap things around. You do have a nice addition with, who came, Fiala coming from Nashville. He's a restricted free agent. He's going to sign. He did look good, and so he'll sign a nice team-friendly deal because he's trying to figure it out. He'll probably sign a 2-year deal, is my guess. Maybe 3 if they're willing to both kind of meet in the middle. And then, Joel Eriksson-Ek, he also has to get re-signed along with Aberg, and so there are some forwards that they'll need to get thrown into this mix. But one more year of Devin Dubnyk too. That's another. He's only making $4.3 million.
Well, 2 more years. You're actually looking at it. They got the 1920 season.
They actually have it correct.
Yeah, which is nice.
Friendly. Yeah. Okay. Well, then all my numbers are just tack on an extra one because obviously I need to probably read a little harder here.
That happens.
But anyway, so it's there are some salaries coming up. I guess Eric Stahl has 2 years left on his deal. Yeah. So, yes, I know that. All right, you're sitting there and you're like, you dumbass. All right, he's got 2 years left on his deal. Thanks. Still, I think if things go south for the Wild, let's say next year they start off and they kind of have a rough start. I think that guys on the chopping block, you got to think Mikko Koivu could be. I mean, they're going to obviously go to him and say, he has a full no move. But they'll probably say, "Hey, did you want to be traded?
Do you want a shot at a cup?"
Yeah, because he's an unrestricted free agent. He could come back.
Yeah, I'll tell you what though. For speaking of Phil Kessel, a place that I think, I've heard, and when we talk about free agents, right, the big name is Panarin, right, and I keep hearing his name float around with the Rangers as well as Florida. I would honestly think, if I'm Phil Kessel, maybe take a shot at going to the Rangers. Maybe the Rangers want to take a stab if they can't get Panarin.
Yeah, they could probably...
They could swing something. They got some decent pieces.
Yeah, and they have a lot of draft picks. So
yeah,
yep. Okay, well, let's obviously that's going to be consistent news here for the next probably up until the draft.
Right.
We've got maybe 5 weeks until the draft. It's just crazy to say.
It's crazy to say that
so fast.
The Cup's almost here.
I know. Stanley Cup Final. We're starting on Monday.
Love it and hate
it. It's one of those. You'll love the first round so much because there's so much happening, and especially when Boston swept Carolina, and you're like, wait, there's a day every other day where there's nothing on. I did, you don't.
That was tough.
It was weird, and now it's going to be 3 games a week. I think is what they do in the final, right? Like a Wednesday, a Friday, and then What do they do? I don't
Wednesday,
know.
Friday, Sunday.
Is that how they do it?
Something like that.
Yeah.
They try to hit those
Then
prime time
they usually
Fridays,
give you
Saturdays.
a 2-day break in between everything.
Yeah.
Who knows how long it'll last, but we'll obviously get to that. Other little smaller news: the Toronto Maple Leafs have added to their coaching staff Paul McFarland as an assistant coach. He comes from the Florida Panthers, who had the second best power play. He ran the power play there. And despite having maybe one of the more talented power plays in the league, I think the Leafs power play left something to be desired.
Yeah, and you got to think, too, I mean, granted, he did have, Barkov and Huberdeau, but now he's getting better pieces.
Right.
I mean,
right. To go from Barkov, Huberdeau, and Mike Hoffman, he had nice
nice
players
pieces,
on his, and Keith Yandel was top notch running that, power playing that or quarterbacking that power play. DJ Smith is the Ottawa Senators head coach, former Leafs assistant coach, and now goes to Ottawa. I'd say special teams for the Leafs were not the greatest, so I don't know if he's going based on his performance this last year, but sometimes guys are better head coaches than they are assistant coaches and vice versa. DJ Smith, is this anything more than like, hey, we're going to bring in a guy who we can bring in cheap, we'll take a chance on him, and if it doesn't work out, it's totally fine because we fully expect to probably not be great for another year or two? If they need to fire him in 2 years, it's no big deal because he probably won't make much money.
Yeah, I mean, you heard the names like Mark Crawford and Jacques Martin floated around, but I think when you're starting in a rebuild, when you basically lost so many valuable pieces, like at this point, it's like, okay, well, if we bring in the veteran guy, we're not really changing that much, right? So bringing in a new face, a guy who had, success playing behind a successful coach. I mean, again, there's not too many guys out that probably wanted to go to Ottawa for the price
Patrick
that they're
Waugh
willing
did.
to pay. Well, yeah.
He interviewed for the job.
And then he probably found out how much money they were going to give him and was like, okay, bye.
Okay, bye. Yeah. Well, and I think Patrick Waugh wants back in the league. I mean, he didn't exactly.
Why wouldn't you want
He
back in
didn't
the league?
exactly go out on the best terms.
No.
When he left in Colorado.
Peace in August. See ya.
Yeah, I think we had just started our show.
We had, yeah.
And he randomly quit. And I think we said it like, how is he ever going to get a job again? That's you do that to somebody, and it's obviously everybody knows you quit. You used a PR
do it the right
firm
way.
to quit.
Yeah.
That's weird. Like a quit in May. Call it quits when you're late earlier, so that your team actually has a chance to go out and look. Of course, it's looking like they had a guy in the wings anyways, and Jared Bednar, despite having his first year being one of the worst in the salary cap era, or the worst in the salary cap era, they stuck with him. And
yeah, I like Bednar.
And
Good
he's
coach.
been a great, I think, person to take Nathan McKinnon and help release him to be the leader that he can be.
He's right up there in my opinion with McKinnon or McDavid now.
Yeah,
he's barely below him.
I'll say that McDavid's just in a world of his own.
Sure.
McKinnon is now in that, like, there's maybe 5 or 6 players in that next tier, and he's one of them. And that's
without a doubt.
Especially from 3 years ago, where people were kind of like, McKinnon, he looked like he was going to be really good, but it kind of, maybe he won't be. Maybe he's just kind of a really good complementary player. No, you were wrong. Sorry. Brock Nelson signs a 6-year, $6 million deal. You have some thoughts about this deal?
Just not a fan of it, to be quite honest. I mean, let me ask you this: is this the going rate now for a 20 goal scorer? Because granted,
25.
Yeah, he's done 25 recently, but
53 points.
Yeah, recently, but the few years before that, okay, last year he got. Granted, he had a down year, but the 4 years before that, yeah, he had 20, 26, and 20. But to me, this is a guy who set personal best, which obviously most guys do in contract years. It just always tends
most
to happen.
guys do when they, like, a new coach comes in, and when you weren't the top guy, and all of a sudden you're now your team's number 2 center. You're getting put on the second power play. You're getting more opportunities. But I'll say that he filled the role. He did it. He's a UFA. He could have signed anywhere else. I think other teams would have given him $6 million.
Sure.
He chooses to stay in New York, and he knows that Barry Trotz probably gives him the best chance to have a really nice career for these last 6 years.
I would agree with you. I do think Barry Trotz, and they kind of fit each other very well in terms of what Barry Trotz is looking for out of a hockey player. However, I just think the way he plays the game, because he plays the game pretty hard, he is a good skater. I think, the last few years of this deal might not look as great because, granted, yes, he did have 53 points last year, but what are we going to get next year? Are we going to get the guy from last season that got 35 points, or are we going to get the guy that, got 53 this year? So
that all depends on if the Islanders bring in a center. Maybe there's obviously some free agents out there. I think the Islanders are going to be pretty active in terms of trying to bring in some guys.
I don't think they're going to get much, but that's just me.
Maybe. I mean, hey, if the Rangers don't want Panarin, I'm sure the Islanders would find a nice spot for him, and he could play alongside Matthew Barzal. Not a bad.
But Panarin probably does not want to play with in Barry Trotz's system. If I had to guess,
maybe. But Panarin's. I mean, he did play in Tortorella's system, and I don't get the sense that he necessarily hated playing for him, maybe until the last half of his very last season. But that's partially because there was so much turmoil going around with him and Bobrovsky that I think it was just creating a lot of negativity. And so I think that situation was bad, but maybe he comes in, he's the fresh face, he's going to be there for a long time. I don't know. I don't think he's going to Florida. He did come out and say Florida has no fans in some interview.
Well.
So, I mean, unless he likes that. If he likes it, but it sounded like he was saying it like, they have no fans.
The
so
Rangers
I don't know.
will be the other team at this point. So we'll see how this all plays out. But
I think San Jose is in the cards.
I don't hate that idea.
Joe Pavelski hasn't been re-signed, and if you think about Vlasic.
They were going to give Tavares $13 million, so why not pony up 10 for Panarin?
Sure,
yeah.
And think about Vlasic and Burns and their Hurdle and the guys that they want there, they sign to long-term deals before they become
Vlasic and Burns too. If you think about it too, they're getting a little older, so you got to make a push now. So why not overpay a little bit for a guy like Panarin, who you're still going to get great production from anyways?
He's only 27 years old or 28. Yeah,
so I wouldn't worry too much about his production over the life of a But and then I keep hearing too, is this possible a sign and trade so he can get his 8th year out of that? Does Columbus entertain that idea?
Sign and trade. I can't believe no one's done it yet. Honestly.
It's kind of crazy, yeah. If you think about it, that and no offer sheets, really.
Do a sign and trade and get a 2nd round pick,
right? Or
a 3rd round pick, even if you get a 5th round pick, it's better than
nothing.
At least you get something. Guys in the NBA do it all the time, and it works out well. And then if they do it, then they'll create some sort of stupid rule in the CBA where they go, oh, no more. If you sign a guy, you can't trade him for 60 days or something like that. They'll stupid. Do something dumb.
Yeah. Okay. Also, real quick, just to to my point about the last few years, I think are going to be kind of bad in terms of Brock Nelson's production. They did also in the last 4 years of his contract put in a partial no trade. The first 2 years got a full no trade. So I think the Islanders too are a little weary about whether or not his production is going to tail off. So they threw that in there.
And I think that that's probably fair to say, hey, once you're 30 years old, we want the option to be able to move you. We have to. If you're a guy making that much money, which $6 million now is like 5 years ago is $4 million guy. And those are the guys you need to be able to move when you have a cap crunch. Is it significant enough to make a difference, but it's also generally not your high end players. It's your next tier.
Right.
Okay, let's do some autopsies.
Please.
Let's whip out the rubber gloves and let's cut open these cadavers.
This is getting weird.
The Carolina Hurricanes they went to Game 7 against the Capitals, but the Pittsburgh Penguins were swept by the Islanders. The Islanders then were swept by the Carolina Hurricanes. The Carolina Hurricanes swept by the Boston Bruins. And maybe we'll have another sweep on our hands. I really, really doubt it. But the Carolina Hurricanes managed to. They don't win a game against the Boston Bruins. They definitely looked outclassed by the time they got to that point. Maybe a little tired. Guys like Justin Williams, who are kind of that heartbeat. And this is there a better example of a team that was carried by heart through those 2 rounds? They maybe got fortunate to beat Washington. They met up against a Washington team that looked a little tired from the run they went on last year. They didn't look like they had the same yes, I must win. Obviously Ovechkin wants to win, but you could tell when they lost.
He looked relieved.
We talked about that, and so maybe not going balls out like they had been the previous year.
Yeah, and they were getting a little lucky too with guys deeper in the lineup like Fogle, producing when they typically wouldn't.
Well, and then you play an Islanders team who probably in a normal year may not have been advancing to that second round with the team that they had. I think they're still there's always those teams where they make it to the second round and they end up maybe missing the playoffs the following year. They were kind of that liar of a team that they slipped their way in there and they had a nice season, but is it a sustainable season with the team that they have? Could they do it again and again and again? I don't know. They definitely fed off a lot of John Tavares left us and people don't think we're going to be good, so we're up against the world, so let's play this certain way. And I think that only lasts for so long. Carolina maybe has more talent than a New York Islanders team, but they are definitely a team that was carried by destiny in a sense. Like you feel that in your soul and you play a different way because you just feel like you're supposed to get there.
Bunch of jerks.
Now, what does this team do moving forward? Obviously, they have to re-sign Sebastian Aho. What's that deal going to look like? Justin Williams, their captain, he's a free agent. Peter Mrazek and Curtis McElhinney, both UFAs. What does this team look like next year? Let's start with the goaltending.
Whew. Yeah, well, first off, if you haven't heard yet, Scott Darling is getting bought out. They are going to get rid of that guy because he was a disaster. And as much as I wanted him to succeed...
You really wanted him
to succeed. Wanted this guy to be successful because I loved him in Chicago and I thought he would be a fantastic, not necessarily a guy who could do 60, 70 games like your Lundqvists or your Tuukka Rasks of the world, but a guy who could come in and give you solid 50 games, I thought. Apparently I was wrong, which happens quite a bit, but he's getting bought out. I do think, honestly, it wouldn't shock me if they bring both these guys back. I think Peter Mrazek is the most likely of the two of them to get re-signed just because he's still a young guy. He's shown potential in the past, and obviously he was the guy they started the playoffs with. He's saying, we're saying you're our guy, so here you go. And so I think he'll get a 2 or 3 year deal. Curtis McElhinney, on the other hand, I honestly would give him a 1 year, $1.5 million deal and say, hey, you want to play 1B again for us? And
yeah, but if you're Curtis McElhinney, do you not go, I think I could probably get 3. Like, imagine Curtis McElhinney going to Calgary.
It's possible, but...
If you don't think... If Mike Smith doesn't want to be there or he won't sign a 1 year deal, he wants multiple years, you don't think David Rittich can get it done, Curtis McElhinney might not be... for a 1A, 1B with David Rittich, could he get $3 million from another team?
Maybe, but I don't know. I think if he hits the market, maybe take a day and just get some phone calls and see what's up, and then tell Carolina, hey, you know what? I'm coming back if you'll have me. Yeah.
Scott Darling, $4.1 million. And he got a no trade clause.
Yeah, I don't know how that one happened either. So.
Yikes. Not that anybody would trade for him, but yeah. Okay, so the goaltending, chances are they sign one of them. And it's probably going to be Mrazek because he's 27. But what happens if a team ponies up? Okay, let's go a team like Calgary. What happens if Calgary offers Peter Mrazek $6 million?
Well, then you're definitely giving McElhinney $3 million to come back.
Sure,
for sure.
Yeah, my guess is that if Peter Mrazek's smart, he sticks it out there because
the system fit him very well for his style of playing. So
yes, I would agree. Sebastian Aho. Your number for Sebastian Aho, where do you think he falls?
Whew, that's tough because this guy's pretty much proven himself to be the de facto number one center, number one forward for this team, right? And moving forward, I don't see any reason why he's not going to produce the exact same way. So for a point per game player, granted, okay, last year 65 points, the year before that 49. So he's gradually increasing, right? Everything's getting better.
Which this is his entry level contract, so that's fair. He's
30 goals. I have to say at least $8.5, $9 million maybe.
Yeah,
it's a little high, but I think that's probably where it's going to be, unless he does like a bridge deal, a 5 year, maybe $7.5 million per.
And to me, when I look at their salary structure, they have $28 million in cap space. My assumption is that they're operating off of a different cap.
I think their budget's a little lower, even though their owner come out and he's a little wild card. I think he's willing to spend, but I do think still just because of the market the way it is, it's not a big market like Chicago, New York, Detroit. Their budget is probably a little bit lower, kind of like Florida and Arizona.
Yeah, you're willing to spend, but maybe that mean like right now. Okay, yeah, $28 million under the cap. That's you're going to be higher than that because the players you have to re-sign. Maybe though, if the upper limit is $83 million, maybe they're spending to 78, 77, something like that.
They only have 3 forwards making more than $5 million a season, which, if I had to guess, would probably be the only team in the NHL that's like that.
I'm wondering if they're going to go like. I think their owner said it during the season. We would much rather have pay for forwards than defensemen. So
someone's getting moved on the back end.
Are they
sure.
about to? Yeah, are they about to move somebody, make a deal?
I think now's the time to trade Falk at a price that any team would jump on.
A UFA,
and 1 year left.
A UFA.
So
maybe there's a UFA out there, another player who's going to become a UFA who could come back. Eric Stahl,
Athanasiou. I'm saying it right now.
Athanasiou,
dude, would look really good. Number 2 center spot for this team, and he'd provide a lot of speed. He can score some goals, and Detroit would love to have Justin
If you're
Falk.
Detroit, though, are you willing to give up Athanasiou for a UFA at the end of this year when you don't necessarily... Detroit going into next season isn't going to be expecting to make the playoffs, although that's going to be the goal. Detroit maybe is hoping to take a step forward. Maybe Steve Yzerman comes out and says otherwise, but at this point, I think there's still another year's worth of a little pain if you're a Red Wings fan.
Yeah, I would agree with that. But, I mean, hey, roll the dice, if you're Detroit at this point. But
hope he re-signs there.
Yeah, hope he resigns.
You could trade for him after July 1st, and it would have to be like, hey, we're signing you to
get an extension. Yeah, maybe. Yeah, that would make more sense. Because I do think Detroit, again, while they are rebuilding, I think, they do need some pieces on the back end, and sometimes you just got to take a risk, I guess.
Yeah, in my opinion, when I think of the Carolina Hurricanes in their current state, I see a team. Obviously, you've got Svechnikov, who's going to be a player. Like we saw, especially the second half of this year, he was nasty, and so hopefully he doesn't pick fights with Alex Ovechkin. He'll never do that again. It's a guarantee. But when you look at their front end, there still is some room to improve, and I think it needs to go beyond bringing in an Athanasiou. Well, he would look nice in their top 6. I think this is a team that needs to go out and make a big splash offensively to take off some of the pressure from Aho. Because let's talk about this. One player gets hurt in their top 6, and this team is suddenly not nearly as dangerous. If Aho ever gets hurt, this team's in big trouble. And to think that you can just rely on one guy playing 82 games all year long and in the playoffs for the next 6-7 years is fool's gold. And so you need to bring in some other center who can play some high end minutes. I don't know if that's Athanasiou. If you're a Stanley Cup winning team, Athanasiou is a great number 3 center.
Sure.
Don't think he's that number 2 guy in the long run that you can rely on in a lot of those situations. So I don't know who that guy is.
Yeah, that's always the $1 million question, right?
Now Justin Williams. Solid player.
He's coming back.
Good performer. I think he'll be back. He'll come back on a nice team-friendly deal.
Yeah.
What if... Now, Joe Pavelski, we've already talked. Maybe he's leaving San Jose. So I haven't re-signed him. Maybe this is a team where Joe Pavelski can go. He can play second. He can be the second-line center. He won't be... It's another... There's some good veterans in this locker room. So he can go and... Carolina still relatively new to the stage that they were playing on. What a great player to bring in. Basically, you're like, all right, here we have Justin Williams. Now let's tack into Joe Pavelski and what that does to mesh with the locker room. I mean, maybe they were rivals playing San Jose, LA for so long, but maybe a great fit for Joe Pavelski if he's going to go somewhere. You still get to be on the water. You're still in a warm area.
Yeah, I don't hate that pick at all. I can tell you right now, there's 30 teams that would love to have him.
Sure. Well, and you get to play in the East, so the travel is less.
Right. But now the question is, how much term are you going to give a guy like that? I think that's the biggest question with Pavelski going
I'm
this
willing
year.
to give Pavelski 3 years.
3 years? Okay, I could do 3 years.
He's younger than Patrick Marleau was when Patrick Marleau signed his 3 years.
He's 30. Pavelski's 34 right now.
And he scored, 30...
Oh, he got 38 goals this year.
40 goals, right?
Yeah, he's a hard-nosed guy at the front of the net, which Carolina desperately needs.
Exactly. And I'm happy to give him $6 million. $6 million for 3 years.
Maybe 7?
I think if you give him 2 years, 2 years at 7.
Okay.
3 years, you're going 3 at 6.
There's not a lot of guys that score 40 goals, so that's
3 years
going to be tough.
But, I mean, is somebody going to give Joe Pavelski 8
somebody might.
For 2.
Maybe, yeah.
But
absolutely.
6 for 3 is still more money.
It'll be interesting because, like we talked about, there's not a lot of 40 goal scorers that are going to hit the market. And not only that, but this team that we're about to talk about could look completely different, and maybe they go spend money other places, and maybe guys don't want to hang around. And now if you're Joe Pa, you're thinking, shoot, maybe I'll go somewhere else that has maybe a better chance, or that actually wants me there. So
yeah. Well, and I don't think that San Jose necessarily doesn't want him there,
or maybe willing to pay me what I think.
I think that San Jose is trying to get Erik Karlsson locked up first. Because if they get Karlsson locked up, then they have to figure out what number they can give
everything else
Joe Pa, because then they have to figure out what they can give Thornton if he wants to come back, which Thornton didn't sound like he was necessarily for sure I'm back in next year. I think I hope he's back. He's back no matter, like if he wants to come back, he's back in San Jose. He's not going to play anywhere else.
No.
I maybe have some pipe dreams of him playing on the fourth line with Marleau in Toronto. But
yeah.
That would be fun. Okay, let's shift gears. Let's go to the San Jose Sharks since we're there. We'll put our sole focus on them. Let's talk their free agents, because when you talk points per game, in terms of free agents, they've got number 3, 4, 8, and 10 in their free agents. Joe Pavelski, Karlsson, Nyquist, and Thornton. We think Thornton will be back if Thornton's back in the league. Not sure if Pavelski's back, although I'm gonna give it like a 65% he's back in San Jose.
Okay.
I think that's probably a fair. Erik Karlsson, I'm going to say it's about 40% that he's back in San Jose. Joe Thornton's just like I think it's a 50-50 because it depends on whether or not he wants to still play. Nyquist, I'm going to say it's about a 25% chance he's back in San Jose. I'm sure he likes playing there. Is he willing to take the same amount of money to stay in San Jose? I don't know.
I think he'll get paid more to go somewhere else, personally.
He makes what, 4?
Yeah, he made 4.5, but still, I mean, for a 60-point guy, there's not a ton of those.
Yeah, he got 60 points, but he's playing on the top line for a bad team most of the year, right? So you have to take into account that he was getting some good
He was
power
on the
play
second
minutes.
line most of the time.
Yeah, that's true. He wasn't up there playing with Larkin.
He was playing with Franz Nielsen most of the year.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
a good center. Maybe he's a 70-point guy.
I mean, when I think of the Florida Panthers, and I think maybe if Mike Hoffman is out, he slides in nicely with the Florida Panthers, and he kind of
Trocheck on that second line would be pretty nice.
Wouldn't mind it. Okay. Other than that, those I mean, there's not much more than that. Also, I mean, you're talking Jonas Donskoy too, has to get re-signed. Timo Meier needs a new deal. What does Timo Meier get to stay in San Jose? Well, I mean, he'll stay in San Jose. He's an RFA, but are they going to give him 6?
Well, he got 66 points, and you got to think Brock Nelson just got 50 points and 6.
A UFA, but yeah. So something probably pretty similar to Brock Nelson. I'd say if you're comparing, you go, how similar is William Nylander to Timo Meier?
Right.
Because I think they're fairly comparable in terms of the points that they put up.
6'9", 4, 3 years for Timo Meier, so he doesn't eat through all his RFA years.
Right. Yeah, or
cash in one more time.
That's possible. And then a Kevin LeBanc, I think you're probably looking around 3 for a Kevin LeBanc, 2.5, something like that.
Yeah, something like that.
Probably a 2-year deal, a nice bridge deal for him. Yeah, San Jose's got a lot of work to do because this team really, if they lose out on Karlsson, let's say if Karlsson was listening to the 31 Thoughts, according to Elliot Friedman, he thinks that he wants to go to Tampa Bay. And that Tampa Bay, obviously, they're going to do what they need to do to bring in Karlsson.
They would move
They'll
JT
move
Miller,
heaven and earth
Tyler
to get
Johnson,
him.
of course.
Yeah.
The only thing I have against Karlsson is his injury history. And I think even if he does hit the market, right, he doesn't, re-sign in San Jose. I do think a lot of teams are going to be hesitant to give him 7 years and give him Drew Doughty money. Because of the injury history, right?
Yeah, I think you're probably looking at a 5-year deal for him.
Yeah, that wouldn't shock me, and I don't think he's going to get $10 million.
If he does in Tampa Bay, he would get $10 million.
I think
he's going to get $10 million.
No, I think even if he goes to Tampa Bay, I think he'll sign for less because
he might actually get the same deal as Hedman or something.
No, I think he'll probably take $7.5-8 million if he went to Tampa. One, because no state taxes, but two, he knows he's got a legit shot at a cup playing there. I mean, it'd be hard for them not to win the cup. They'd really have to try not to win the cup. Although San Jose has,
a pretty comparable defense to what Tampa had this last year.
Yeah, I don't hate San Jose's defense, but just their forward group is definitely not as attractive as Tampa Bay's.
No, that is
and
true.
their goaltending the same. So
That is true. Although Logan Couture was on pace to have like the best, most goals in a playoff. Do you know who has the most goals in one playoff season?
Sidney Crosby?
No, it's Joe Sakic.
Is it really?
Yeah, he has like 18 goals. It's not even that many. Well,
no, I know it's not
sort
that
of
many,
is, but
it's still crazy to think about that Mario or Wayne Gretzky didn't get 18.
I think Gretzky had maybe 17, something like that, and Lemieux had 16 twice.
I think Wayne Gretzky put up like 47
points in a playoff. That's insane.
Stop.
Like two points per game in the playoffs. It's good old 80s for you.
Yep.
San Jose Sharks coming back next year. I forgot to ask about Carolina, but I'll go back and ask it. Do the San Jose Sharks, are they a team that could win the division again next year? Do they fall back? Do they go wild card? Where do you think that this team, right now, looking at them and considering what could happen, what does this team step forward, step backwards?
Considering what would happen, I think they're third place, maybe a bubble team, a wild card bubble team, in the playoffs next year. I do think they make the playoffs because I look at that Pacific. I don't think there's a lot of threats to them in the Pacific outside of Calgary and Vegas.
You got to think that Edmonton figures out
you
something.
Hope, but I don't think so.
Vancouver's going to be better.
Years. Yeah,
I think it's certain Vancouver will be better.
Yeah,
Vancouver can LA be any worse? I don't think so.
No, but they're not going to get that
Anaheim
much better. in my opinion.
might be worse.
Yeah, they will definitely be worse unless Gibson pulls a rabbit out of his ass. But
he's been known to do that.
Yeah, he has. Martin Jones has to get it together next season if they want it. But I think Vegas is ultimately going to win the division next year, in my opinion, just because I think a full year of
with Captain Mark Stone.
My gosh, that's going to be so freaking good. So I think Calgary. I don't think they'll get that much worse, if anything.
They should be pretty similar.
Yeah.
They might not win the division again.
Right.
To me, I think this team's going to miss the playoffs next year.
It wouldn't shock me.
Right now, where we sit, if they only bring back 2 of these 4 free agents and they kind of fill in the gaps with lesser players. Now, if like a Panarin comes and signs in San Jose or something, then okay,
whole nother
I'll change
story.
my pick. Right now, where it stands and the way that I feel about where some of these guys are going, they would be my team that would have the biggest fall off from this year to next year.
I will say the Central is going to probably take 5 spots next year again. So we see the Central take 5, and Vancouver, like you just mentioned, is probably the one team, in my opinion, that does have a shot to unseed San Jose in the Pacific. So I'm still sticking with them at 3, but who knows? We'll see. It depends what they do. If you lose Carlson, Joe Pa, and who knows if Joe Thornton doesn't even come back either. Like, you're losing so much flipping offense. It's going to be really tough for them to make up for it because I don't think Martin Jones is going to be phenomenal next year. I think he'll probably get it together and be a decent goaltender, but he's not going to, be a John Gibson type.
I think he'll probably be more like what he was in the playoffs than he was in the regular season.
Yep, absolutely.
Well, we trust that the bodies of the Hurricanes and the Sharks have been thoroughly examined. Well, obviously, we'll come back through everybody while we hit the draft, but let's turn our attention to the 2 teams still breathing: the Boston Bruins and the St. Louis Blues. The St. Louis Blues and the Bruins last met in 1970 when the Bruins swept them.
That magical Bobby Orr goal.
Yes, which is always funny to me, that goal. I mean, it was in a game 4, in overtime. Great. If the Blues had won that game, okay, the Bruins probably win the next game after that. It's that Blues team. It wasn't even fair, really, the way that the league did it, where it was, all right, let's put all the expansion teams into one division.
I know.
And we'll make them all play each other. I guess it was fair in a sense.
Was it, though?
Like,
it gives them a shot.
It allowed a team to make it to the final, and like it allowed 4 teams to play, or 2 teams to go through. And
we will say we did see the beginning of a legend in Scotty Bowman. 4 years with St. Louis,
yes.
Bring him to the Cup.
Yeah, 4 years in a row, but got swept every single time. But they made it. Yes, they will play each other. They have played each other a couple times. This, I think, is very different. As we're in 2019. The Boston Bruins last won in 2011. Now here, kind of I'd say for the Bruins, they had a very fortunate run. They they have, I think the hardest matchup for them was the first round against Toronto. They definitely, Columbus was a good second round matchup, but they handled them pretty well. And then they rolled all over Carolina. So they're coming in here feeling pretty good about themselves. And then when it comes to the St. Louis Blues, I think they've been more. It's been much more of a battle for them.
They've been battling since January.
To play. Yes, that's very true. So the question is going to be: do they have the gas? And can it these two styles of play? I think that maybe the Bruins are the closest to the Blues in terms of any team in the Eastern Conference. Like they could actually play that heavy style game, even though they maybe aren't quite as heavy as they once were in 2011. We'll say
sure.
Chara isn't quite the Norris Trophy winner that he was
on the back end,
right?
Guys like that,
Seidenberg back there,
right?
So let's just break this down: forward, defense, and goaltending. We'll start with the forwards. How do you compare these two forward groups?
Well, okay. Start with Boston, right? We know about the top line. We know how good those guys are. There's no denying it. They're going to be a handful for either one of the lines that St. Louis tries to pull out, whether it's their top, their second pairing, or even their third line. Although it wouldn't quite shock me if we see Ryan O'Reilly going up against Bergeron every single faceoff. So
here's a question. Does Boston have the three best players in this series?
No.
Marchand, Bergeron, and Pasternak.
I don't think so.
So who is better than any of those guys?
I think
Would you rather have Tarasenko than
I would.
any
Absolutely.
one of those guys?
He is heating up right now.
He's heating up, but is he a guy that you can let's say Boston goes, fine, we're going to play our big three against Tarasenko every single time. Can Tarasenko break through? That's my question. Do they have the horses around him to break through? My feeling is
it's going to be
that
tough.
When it comes to those top end guys, it's definitely Boston's advantage.
Well, sure. I think if you said take any three guys on St. Louis versus any three guys on Boston, those guys, you would take those three from Boston every single time.
Yes.
I don't think there's any argument there, and I don't think anybody can make a valid argument for St. Louis. But, however, I do think once you get past those three, that's where St. Louis is going to have a clear advantage.
100%.
Yeah.
Maybe not so clear, but because of the way David Krejci has played in these playoffs. I would say at the beginning of the year, if you looked at these teams on paper, you would say that. But David Krejci has come alive here.
Sure. Krejci
this might be the last time that
good.
we see vintage David Krejci.
Won't disagree with you. It'll be interesting though when you look at some of the other guys like Marcus Johansson, David Backes, former captain returning to St. Louis, right? Yeah. That'll be interesting. Jake DeBrusk, can these guys get it done? And I think St. Louis, they play a heavy forecheck. They shut you down the neutral zone. They don't allow you many chances to enter the zone and clean. So is Boston going to be able to adjust their game? I think St. Louis, if they have to mix up lines, they have to split up Schwartz and Tarasenko on that top line. They're not afraid to do so. Right. And I think that's where the advantage might come into St. Louis's hands a little bit more because, Perron's been great. Ryan O'Reilly, we know he'll produce. Patrick Maroon, Robert Thomas.
Tyler Bozak's been phenomenal for this team. I'm actually super pumped for Tyler Bozak.
I am too.
He gets replaced, in Toronto.
Right.
Nobody is saying that the Leafs were dumb you traded Bozak for John Tavares. Anyone's going to take that. They're going to take Tavares and run.
Right.
But it's good to see, he kind of leaves this team that was the up-and-coming team, and he gets to go to the Stanley Cup Finals. Finally, this guy finds some playoff success after some miserable years. I mean, he was on the team that blew the 3-goal lead in Game 7. He was on some of the worst teams in the salary cap era with some of those Leafs teams. When the Peter Horacek era,
right.
The Leafs, there was some rough times.
Yeah, and I think for Boston, their claim to fame on how they were able to be so successful in the East was that their depth at their third and fourth line was producing, right?
Sure.
Well, St. Louis is just as capable, I think,
top to
do that. Yeah. So now Boston doesn't have that advantage where they can roll out the fourth line and say, hey, they're going to go out and get points for us because St. Louis can just do the same. And so I don't know. To me, I think I would rather take. Obviously, if we're taking one line versus one line, I'll take Boston's top line all day long. But as a whole, I think I might give a slight edge to St. Louis just because I think they can mix and match any guy on any line they want and still get some pretty dang good results.
Yeah, the Bruins, 38% of their goals in the playoffs have come from their top line.
Okay, there
now,
you go.
The Blues, though, when you think of that Sharks series, and you see the way that they were able to not only I think it was the Shark Peter DeBoer. He said we had no space. Like we had nowhere to go. Their forecheck's so good, and they close in on you really fast. Now, the difference being, I think that the Bruins have more speed on their top line. I mean, but also the Blues, not only did they have a great forecheck, they punished the Sharks. I mean, think about Game 7. Physically. They didn't have Erik Karlsson. They didn't have Joe Pavelski. They didn't have Tomas Hertl. I mean, they were missing some key pieces because San Jose drove them into the ground. Now, that's not discounting what happened to them against the Vegas Golden Knights. It's not saying that...
Yeah, they ran out of 9 lives.
They got beaten up in just about every series. I mean, even Colorado, maybe to a lesser extent. But, yeah, that Vegas series, I think, beat guys up, and that held them back. They looked exhausted by the end of that series. So I think there's something special about this St. Louis team. I'll give them the intangible of or something.
Win it for Layla. Legit. They've got motivation that I think Boston doesn't right now. Patrick Maroon, a hometown guy, like you talk about, Tyler Bozak. There's so many storylines on the St. Louis team.
Yeah. I mean, Jordan Bennington.
Dude, yes.
We'll get to goaltending.
Worst team in January. I mean, so many storylines for St. Louis to win.
Yeah, we'll get to goaltending. Let's go defense. Obviously, I mean, Jay Bouwmeester finally gets into a Stanley Cup Final. He's been in the league since, I think he was drafted in 2002.
Yeah, I think you're right.
2002 or 2003. Yeah, I mean, a guy who, and he's had a lot of crap thrown on him. You know, he was supposed to be a certain type of player, and maybe didn't pan out the way that people thought. But still, I mean, the guy did win a gold medal with Team Canada. He's no slouch. He maybe, you know, he
started off with an offensive-minded guy,
right.
And he's settled into more of a D-man's D
role. Yeah. To me, when I think about St. Louis's defense, I see a lot of depth and huge players, like just Pietrangelo and a guy like Bouwmeester and Colton Parayko. These are guys that play a heavy game, and they can move the puck. When I go Boston, I mean, Chara's massive. So obviously, maybe some of the size is taken out there, but he's slowed down. Boston, though, has been sneaky with their defensemen. You know, I think that maybe on paper you don't necessarily you're not scared of their defense, but Grzelcyk's been phenomenal. Torrey Krug and Charlie Coyle, they have some horses back there. Who would you rather have, St. Louis's defense or Boston's?
Oh, I'm taking St. Louis's all day long.
Okay.
All day long. And I say that because, okay, yeah, you're right. You know, McAvoy, Krug, Grzelcyk, how long can he keep this up? I'm not sure. But regardless, I think you're still going to get the offensive production you typically get from a McAvoy and a Krug. There's no doubt there. However, I do think when it comes to playing heavy and physical, which is what St. Louis is going to want to do in this series, especially with that forecheck, it's going to be hard to go up against Pietrangelo, Parayko, who is going to destroy some people. I think he's going to be one of the unsung heroes of this series.
I hope so.
Yeah. Joel Edmondson, you know, like we talked about, Jay Bouwmeester now is playing that physical game a little bit more. And I think, yeah, we do know Zdeno Chara can do that, but he's not as fast as those guys, for sure. And I think when you talk about moving the puck as well, those guys that we talked about on St. Louis who can play that physical game, they can move the puck just as well. You know, they can produce the points too. I think, what was it? I think St. Louis has gotten 44 points from their back end this playoffs, which is insane. So to me, I give the edge to St. Louis. I think don't put them on the power play either. I think that back end is
yeah,
too
but
good.
I mean, at the same time, don't put Boston on the power play. Boston's 34% on the power play.
That's very true. Very
true.
They
were 46% against the Carolina Hurricanes. That's madness.
I think Boston with that Carolina series got into the right matchup for them. Just the same as the Islanders did against Pittsburgh,
and the
right?
same Boston and Toronto.
Absolutely,
Toronto couldn't stop them. Columbus did better on their penalty kill because Columbus has a decent penalty kill.
Sure.
Well, they had a decent penalty kill. So, yeah, the special teams will be pretty important. I'm wondering, you're talking Stanley Cup Final, these refs are probably going to put their whistles away a little more. They're going to let these guys play, so maybe you don't get the same amount of calls. Although, I mean, yeah, you think 15 penalties in 4 games, it's a good amount of power plays in the conference final. So, But Carolina kind of lost their head a couple times. Justin Williams took a couple stupid penalties, and so there was some frustration calls out
Boston is known to cause the other team to get a little frustrated.
And I think if there's one team that won't bite, it's St. Louis. They seem to have their heads on straight. I mean, especially if a team can go through what they went through, going down 2-1 on a goal that shouldn't have counted. People were pissed, and they managed to rally, and they find themselves in the Stanley Cup Finals. Let's go to goaltending. I know it's your baby.
Yeah.
I wanted to save it for last. Tuukka Rask, NHL best, 1.84 goals against average. The only one. He's Binnington's close, 2.36. He actually is maybe taking a little step back in the playoffs. Not that he's been fantastic.
He's been solid for St. Louis.
I think the difference is that he's had a couple stinkers, but then when in the games that they win, he's great.
Yeah, the great thing, like you talk about with those stinkers, Binnington knows he bounces back very, very well. And every single time he's had a terrible game in the playoffs, he's bounced back the next game perfect.
Yes.
And I'll take that guy who will give up 6 goals, but then the next 3 games 2-1-0 or whatever. Rask, we know what we're getting out of Rask. He's been solid. He's been great. And so far, I would probably put him as the front runner for the Conn Smythe at this point.
I think you have to.
Yeah.
Because you can't give a Conn Smythe trophy to an entire line.
No,
so
exactly.
Well, and Binnington, in his last 3 games, those 3 games that they beat the Sharks, stopped 75 of 77 shots.
It's pretty dang good.
97.4 save percentage. That's fine.
Again,
I'll take that.
The edge to Boston, but it's not that far off. It's not that far removed where you looked at, for instance, where we maybe looked at some other series, like when you look at Mrazek versus, Rask, you would definitely take Rask in a heartbeat, but I think this season, Binnington's proven he's not a fluke. He's not a flash in the pan type of guy, and it's funny to think too. Last season, he refused to go to the ECHL,
yes,
and so they loaned him to Providence.
Yeah,
so maybe he's got an edge there, knowing what goes on in Boston's head a little bit more, what their coaching's like, and
that's a great point.
Be like, okay, I kind of got some insider information here.
That's a great point. I never thought about that. That's
yeah.
Those are the things you get.
Those are
Justin Baker here at Overtime Hockey Talk. Your pick for the series. Oh, how many games is it going to go?
6 games.
I'm saying 7.
Okay.
I'm going 7.
The NHL is open for 7.
Full length. I
no surprise if it does.
I think this is going to be tight. It's going to be a 1-1, 1-1, 1-1, 1-1. It's going to be back and forth.
Okay. Well, who's playing home? Boston's playing home.
Boston
right?
will be home.
That's right.
Yeah.
I think St. Louis wins it in 6 in St. Louis.
I hope that happens.
Yeah,
that'd be pretty epic. My hope, though, when I don't really care if Boston wins. Okay, I'm gonna kind of I think anybody outside of Boston's kind of like, you guys win everything right now. We're all jealous of you, and that's like, I'll gladly admit, people are like, oh, you just hate Boston. No, you're freaking jealous because they've won everything.
Right. Patriots won't stop losing. The Red Sox
people
win
just don't like the city of Boston in terms of sports because they're jealous, and I am jealous. I wish that I wish all my teams won every year. That'd be great. But it's just kind of like, okay, let's you can stop winning, okay. And St. Louis, they deserve a cup. I mean, this fan base has been through a lot, but I'll tell you what I root for. When I don't care, this is the same as Super Bowl. Super Bowl, I root for overtime every time, unless it was the Lions.
The one time
I root for
never happened.
Then I root for 80-0 for the Lions but it'll never happen, so it's okay. I'm rooting Game 7 overtime. I believe it's happened 2 or 3 times.
I'm going to look that up right now.
I can't remember now. I know that the Red Wings were involved in both of them. I think the Red Wings actually won both of them. They're like 1951 and 1954. Look up those like the
twice.
2 times.
2 times.
1951, 1954. Tell me if I'm right.
Well, I do see.
Look up like Stanley Cup Final 1951. Well, you look that up. I will say that this series will probably be won by whichever goaltender can absolutely steal the show.
I don't know if I necessarily say steal the show, but whoever can be more consistent to me would be the bigger factor.
Well, and if it's going to go to 6 games, then Binnington's going to need to be good, and he's going to need to be good in maybe all 6 of those games for them to win. I really think that top line is going to put on some serious pressure. They are grooving right now. So If Boston wins, it's because that top line just goes ham.
That's going to be it. Yeah.
I don't think they're going to win on the strength of their depth. That top line has all the pressure, and that to me is why St. Louis is going to win, because I think St. Louis can shut them down. When I say shut down, I mean like limit the damage from what they do. You know?
Sure. I mean, we looked at San Jose, right? They were very reliant heavily on Logan Couture scoring goals for them, and St. Louis found a way to shut them down. They've done it every single series against Dallas. They shut down their top goal scorers. Jamie Benn wasn't really producing, so I think again they're going to have to find a way to shut down that top line. I think if you have to go in terms of your second, third, and fourth lines, St. Louis is definitely going to have the edge there to win this thing out. And so just to answer your question, though, it is Detroit both times. 1950 against the Rangers 4-3, and against the 1954 Montreal Canadiens 2-1.
Okay, I was pretty much right. I'll give myself one year off. One year off.
It was great. Good guesses, though.
2 overtime. That's it's crazy that it's happened 2 times and it happened in a 4-year span.
That's true.
The same team did it. Never happened again. So I always root for, at the very least, I'm rooting for overtime in the game when it all finishes. I think I've said it before on the show, but I collect the Stanley Cup winning goal scorer, like whoever scores that.
You do have the last overtime winner's autograph, though.
Yeah,
Alec Martinez.
Yes, I did.
The last time an overtime goal won a series.
Yep, that's true. I do have it. I actually saw the puck that he scored that goal with. I saw it up for auction. I didn't have $3,500 to spend on a puck at the time.
That's a lot of money.
Still don't, because it's a piece of rubber. I don't.
Yeah, that's hard to justify.
I like my collection.
Did he sign it, though?
Oh, yeah, he signed it. I like my collection. It's cool. Now, if that was
maybe a Bobby Orr,
John Tavares.
Sure.
Okay, Bobby Orr's game-winning puck. Yeah, it's going to be more than $3,500
because he did it in 1970, like we talked about.
I'd say if it was a team that I cared about and that puck was that much, I would.
What about even Patrick Kane's winner against Philly in 2010?
Be cool to have it. I think that puck's in the Hall of Fame, isn't it?
Probably is.
Or is he
the goal that nobody could.
I feel like why wouldn't you want that puck for yourself? What's $3,500?
Yeah, I don't know.
When you're making, even if you're making like league minimum.
A lot of those guys probably have 100 pucks sitting in their room anyway.
Yeah, but it's your one. Like you scored the Stanley Cup winning goal. There's only 100 and a little bit guys that have done it. So
yeah, you get that big ring, you probably don't care as much about the puck, I suppose. But let me ask you this though. Now, do you know who the longest Stanley Cup Final drought, the team with the longest drought in the Stanley Cup Final is?
It's the Leafs.
Yeah, it is. Okay, good.
1967.
Yeah.
Now, see, somebody was saying that, if the Blues win the Cup, then they'll officially be. Then the Leafs will be the sole owner of the longest without a cup. Except for the thing is that the Blues couldn't have won the Cup in 1967 because they weren't in the league. And so the season was 67-68. So the Leafs still own that because the Blues haven't won the Cup since the first time they had the chance was 1968. So that's anybody that's spouting that out, saying that the Blues have been just as long as the Leafs. That's not true because the Blues couldn't have won it in 1967. They weren't an expansion team yet. Okay. Enough of that. We'll let you guys go. Go enjoy the rest of your day, your night. We hope you enjoy the finals. We'll be back during the finals, of course.
Hell yeah, we'll be back.
We'll be watching all those games. So we tweet at us. We'll be on Twitter. We'll be throwing shade around as we go. So at OT Hockey Talk. Our show's called Overtime Hockey Talk, but we like the short form. Authaki is also the way you could say our Twitter. Authaki.
Wow.
Yeah. Justin, you have a great night. Have fun at Home Depot. Buy things for your house. And we will talk to you guys very soon.